You're not welcome this Christmas. My mother's words crackled through the phone, cold and final like ice breaking on a frozen lake. I stood in my small apartment kitchen, the December sun casting weak shadows across the linoleum floor, my free hand gripping the counter to steady myself. "Mom, please," I said, fighting to keep my voice level. "It's Christmas. The whole family will be there. That's precisely why you can't come, Catherine. Your sister doesn't want to see you, and frankly, neither do I. Not after what you did." What I did. The accusation hung between us, distorted by months of silence and misunderstanding. From my perspective, I'd simply told the truth that my sister's husband had propositioned me during last year's Christmas gathering, cornering me in the laundry room, while everyone else watched holiday movies upstairs. But when I'd finally gathered the courage to tell my sister in March, the family had imploded. Emma had chosen to believe David's denials, and my mother had sided with her as she always did. "I never lied about what happened," I said softly. "I wouldn't do that." "You've always been jealous of your sister's happiness," Mom replied, her voice hardening. "Ever since you were children. Emma has a beautiful home, a successful husband, the twins. And you," she stopped abruptly, but the implication was clear. "And I had nothing. A failed engagement 3 years ago. A modest apartment in the city. A job teaching high school English that barely covered my student loans. At 34, I was a family disappointment and now, apparently, the family pariah. So that's it. I'm just uninvited from Christmas?" The hurt was so acute it felt physical, a hollowing out beneath my ribs. "It's for the best, Catherine. Maybe next year, if you've come to your senses and apologized to your sister and David." The call ended before I could respond, leaving me standing in my silent kitchen. Phone still clutched in my hand. Outside, Christmas lights twinkled along the eaves of neighboring buildings, a cheerful contrast to the emptiness spreading inside me. I'd spent every Christmas of my life with my family. Even during college, even the year I studied abroad in London, I'd flown home to our small Connecticut town for the holidays. It was tradition Christmas Eve dinner with the extended family, midnight church service, stockings and presents in the morning. Last year had been the first time the gathering was at Emma's sprawling colonial house, instead of our childhood home, now that she had the twins and Mom had downsized to a condo nearby. Last year, when everything changed, I slid down to sit on the kitchen floor, knees pulled to my chest, allowing the tears to come. Not just for this Christmas, but for the family that had fractured beyond recognition. For the sister who had once been my closest confidant, but now wouldn't even speak to me. For the mother who had chosen the more convenient truth over her younger daughter. For long minutes I sat there, the December chill seeping through the window and into my bones. Then, slowly, I picked myself up. This was reality now. I would spend Christmas alone, for the first time in my life. I would get through it, as I'd gotten through the past 9 months of family exile. But as the day wore on, a different emotion began to simmer beneath the hurt, defiance, maybe. Or determination. I might be unwelcome, but that didn't mean I had to disappear completely. I wouldn't force my presence where it wasn't wanted, but I could still. What gesture could possibly bridge this gulf? The answer came to me later that evening as I half-heartedly sorted through Christmas decorations I'd initially planned to leave boxed up this year. At the bottom of a storage bin, wrapped in tissue paper, lay a small wooden box painted a vibrant red of family heirloom passed down through generations of women in our family. The memory box, we called it. My grandmother had given it to my mother on her wedding day, and Mom had shown it to Emma and me when we were girls, explaining its significance. Inside were small treasures, a pressed flower from my grandmother's wedding bouquet, a lock of my mother's baby hair, tiny notes and trinkets representing pivotal moments in the lives of the women who had owned it. "Someday, this will belong to one of you," Mom had told us, carefully closing the lid. The keeper of the family memories. I'd always assumed it would go to Emma, the firstborn and favored daughter. But 3 years ago, on my 31st birthday, Mom had surprised me by placing the red box in my hands. "You've always been the one who remembers the stories," she'd said. "The one who keeps the family history alive. This should be yours." It had been one of the few times I'd felt chosen, seen for who I truly was rather than measured against my sister. The red box had become my most treasured possession, and over the past 3 years, I'd added my own memories to its collection. The program from my first school play as a teacher, rather than a student. A pebble from the beach where Michael had proposed before he changed his mind 6 months later. A handwritten note from my favorite professor when I completed my master's thesis. Now, holding the box in my hands, an idea began to form. If I couldn't attend Christmas, perhaps I could still participate in my own way by sharing this piece of family legacy. Not permanently, I wasn't ready to relinquish it, but perhaps as a reminder of connections that ran deeper than the current rift. of memories that bound us together even when present circumstances pulled us apart. I would fill the box with small gifts, meaningful tokens for each family member. I would leave it on Mom's doorstep on Christmas Eve, a silent ambassador, where I could not go myself. And maybe, just maybe, it would begin to heal what had been broken. Over the next week, I put my plan into action. For my 13-year-old nieces, Charlotte and Lily, I found copies of the books I loved at their age: A Wrinkle in Time for Dreamy, sensitive Charlotte, and Island of the Blue Dolphins for adventurous Lily. For my mother, a small bottle of the lavender hand cream she'd always used, its scent instantly evocative of my childhood. For Emma, the most difficult choice, I finally settled on a delicate silver bookmark engraved with the first lines of the poem we'd both memorized for a school competition as teenagers. Hope is a thing with feathers that perches in the soul. I hesitated over whether to include something for David, my brother-in-law of 15 years, and the reason for my exile. Professional ethics as a high school teacher dictated that I include him. He was still family, regardless of what had transpired, but I couldn't bring myself to select a personal gift instead. I included a neutral gift card to the bookstore chain he frequented. Impersonal, perhaps, but not openly hostile. Each item I wrapped individually in tissue paper, tucking handwritten notes beneath the ribbons. Then I nestled them all inside the red box, along with a letter explaining why I'd chosen to share this treasured object temporarily, asking that they return it after the holidays. I didn't mention the incident from last Christmas or the ongoing estrangement. This wasn't about reopening wounds, but offering a tentative path toward healing as Christmas Eve approached. Doubt crept in. Would my gesture be seen as I intended? Or would it be interpreted as an intrusion? Another perceived offense? Would the box even be opened? Or would it be left on the doorstep to freeze in the December night? Had I selected the right gifts, the right words? But beneath these questions lay a deeper certainty. I needed to do this, for myself as much as for them. To maintain the connection, however tenuous. To say, I am still here, still part of this family, whether you acknowledge me or not. On the morning of Christmas Eve, I packed the red box carefully in a larger shipping container, cushioning it with bubble wrap. The forecast predicted snow by evening, and I wanted to ensure the box and its contents would be protected if left outdoors for any length of time. I debated including my return address, eventually deciding against it. They knew where to find me if they chose to. Throughout the day, I busied myself with small tasks, grading final papers from the semester, baking cookies I would mostly eat myself, half-heartedly streaming a Christmas movie I'd seen a dozen times before, anything to distract from the hollow ache that expanded as evening approached, bringing with it memories of Christmas Eves past. The traditional seafood dinner Dad had always prepared before his death 7 years ago, the familiar carols Mom played on the upright piano in the living room, the excitement of the twins in recent years, their belief in Santa Claus only just beginning to waver, all experiences I would miss this year, and perhaps for many years to come. As twilight descended, I bundled up in my warmest coat and boots. The temperature had dropped steadily throughout the afternoon, and the first hesitant snowflakes were beginning to drift from the darkening sky. The drive to my mother's condo would take about 40 minutes in good weather, with snow starting. I allowed an extra 15. I placed a carefully packaged red box on the passenger seat, secured it with the seat belt as if it were a person, and set out. The roads were still relatively clear, early enough that holiday travelers had either reached their destinations or had yet to depart. Christmas lights glowed from houses and storefronts, their colors muted through the gentle curtain of falling snow. As I drove, I rehearsed various scenarios in my head. What if someone saw me approaching the door? What if Mom herself answered? What would I say? Part of me hoped for such an encounter, a chance to see her face, to plead my case in person. Another part dreaded it, fearing another rejection, another dismissal of my truth in favor of a more convenient narrative. But when I pulled onto my mother's street around 6:30 p.m., I saw that fortune had decided the matter for me. Her driveway stood empty, her windows dark. Of course they would be at Emma's house already, gathered for Christmas Eve dinner. Relief and disappointment mingled as I parked across the street, leaving the engine running. The snow was falling more heavily now, collecting on the windshield faster than the wipers could clear it. I sat for a moment, gathering my courage for the simple act of leaving a gift for my own family. How strange that something once so natural should now require such deliberation. Finally, I grabbed the package, hurried up the front walk, and placed it carefully on the sheltered portion of the porch. After a moment's hesitation, I rang the doorbell, knowing no one would answer but taking comfort in the familiar chime, echoing through the empty house. A symbolic announcement, I was here, even in my absence. As I turned to leave, a light caught my eye across the street, a neighbor peering through parted curtains. Mrs. Reynolds, who had lived there since I was a child. I raised a gloved hand in greeting, uncertain whether she recognized me through the falling snow and gathering darkness. After a moment, she waved back. A witness, someone who could confirm I had been here, left something rather than taken anything away. Someone who might mention to my mother that her younger daughter had visited on Christmas Eve. Contrary to instructions, the thought gave me a small, defiant satisfaction as I returned to my car and pulled away from the curb. The red box sat on my mother's porch, snow already dusting its protective packaging. Inside lay fragments of our shared history, pieces of myself offered without expectation, but with fragile hope. Whether that offering would be accepted remained to be seen. The drive back to my apartment felt longer, the holiday lights no longer cheerful but somehow melancholy, highlighting my solitude on this most family-oriented of evenings. By the time I climbed the stairs to my third-floor unit, the emotions I'd been holding at bay rushed forward, overwhelming my carefully constructed composure. I shed my wet coat and boots in the entryway, then curled onto my couch, allowing the tears to flow freely. For all my determination, all my careful planning, the reality of spending Christmas alone cut deeply. Tomorrow morning there would be no excited voices, no shared breakfast, no exchange of gifts. Just silence, and the echoing absence of traditions that had defined my life for 34 years. While my phone buzzed with a text message. For one wild moment, hope surged that it might be from my mother or sister, an acknowledgement of the red box, perhaps, or even an 11th-hour change of heart about my exile. But it was from Nora, my closest friend and colleague at the high school. Merry Christmas Eve. Just checking that we're still on for tomorrow. Dinner at 4. Bring whatever dessert you mentioned that involves ridiculous amounts of chocolate. No pressure to be cheerful. Holiday blues welcome at House Bennett. Nora's invitation, extended weeks ago when she learned of my family situation, had been a lifeline I'd accepted gratefully but without real enthusiasm. Now, it represented my only Christmas plans, a borrowed celebration with my friend's boisterous family rather than my own. Absolutely still on, I texted back. Triple chocolate mousse cake coming your way. Thanks again for including me. Her response came quickly. No thanks needed. Family isn't just blood. See you tomorrow. Family isn't just blood. The words resonated as I prepared for bed, brushing my teeth mechanically and changing into the flannel pajamas that had been an early gift to myself. Perhaps Nora was right. Perhaps family could be redefined, expanded beyond the confines of biology and shared history to include those who chose to stand by you, who believed your truth even when it was inconvenient. Still, as I drifted toward uneasy sleep, my thoughts returned to the red box sitting on my mother's porch. By now, she would have returned from Emma's house, perhaps noticed the package, maybe even brought it inside. Was she opening it at this moment? Reading my letter, examining the carefully chosen gifts? Or had she recognized my handwriting on the outer packaging and set it aside, unwilling to engage with my peace offering? I would likely never know. The red box might be returned to me silently, or it might disappear into the family archives without acknowledgement. Either way, I had made my gesture. I had maintained my connection to our shared past, however tenuous the thread had become. I had refused to be entirely erased, even as I respected the boundaries currently drawn. It would have to be enough. Morning arrived with muted light filtering through my bedroom blinds, the world outside hushed by several inches of fresh snow. For a disoriented moment upon waking, I experienced the familiar Christmas morning anticipation, that childlike excitement that had never quite disappeared, even in adulthood. Then reality crashed in. This wasn't a normal Christmas. There would be no family gathering, no traditional breakfast, no exchange of gifts around a decorated tree. I checked my phone, 8:17 a.m., and no messages. Not that I truly expected any, but hope is persistent, especially on Christmas Day. With no reason to rush, I allowed myself the luxury of lingering in bed, scrolling mindlessly through social media that was now flooded with perfectly curated holiday moments, smiling families in matching pajamas, mountains of beautifully wrapped presents, elaborately decorated tables set for Christmas feasts. Each image a small knife twist, a reminder of what I was missing. After 15 minutes of this self-torture, I put the phone down and forced myself to get up. I could wallow, or I could salvage what remained of this holiday. The choice, at least, was mine. I made coffee, stronger than usual, and carried it to the small artificial tree I'd set up near my living room window. Beneath it sat a modest collection of packages, gifts from colleagues, a few from students, several from friends who'd stopped by before departing for their own family celebrations. Not the Christmas morning abundance I was accustomed to, but not nothing either. I settled cross-legged on the floor and began to open them slowly, savoring each one. A handmade scarf from Nora, a first-edition copy of Pride and Prejudice from my department head, who knew of my Austen obsession. A gift card for my favorite coffee shop from the student teacher I'd mentored last semester. Small tokens of appreciation and affection that, taken together, formed a different kind of wealth than I'd previously measured. The morning passed quietly. I called my aunt in Florida, my father's sister who had never been particularly close with my mother, and thus remained neutral. In the current family schism, we chatted about inconsequential things: the unusually warm Florida winter, her granddaughter's college applications, a new recipe she tried for Christmas breakfast. Neither of us mentioned my absence from the family gathering in Connecticut. Around noon, I began preparing the elaborate chocolate mousse cake I'd promised to bring to Nora's. The process was meditative: melting chocolate, whipping cream, carefully layering the components. For a few hours, I lost myself in the precise measurements and techniques, the familiar comfort of creating something with my hands. The cake was chilling in the refrigerator when my phone rang at 2:13 p.m. Unknown number. Probably a robocall, even on Christmas. But I answered anyway. Hello, silence on the other end, then a small, tentative voice. Aunt Kat? My heart stuttered. Charlotte. My niece, Emma's daughter, the quieter and more sensitive of the twins. Is that you? Yeah. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I'm using Grandma's landline. Mom doesn't know I'm calling. I sank onto a kitchen chair, emotions warring between concern and a fierce joy at hearing her voice after 9 months of separation. Is everything okay, sweetie? I guess. A pause. We got your box. The red one. My pulse quickened. You did? Grandma brought it over this morning. She said it was from you and that we could open the presents inside. But then she and Mom had a big fight in the kitchen. They thought we couldn't hear them. But we could. I closed my eyes, imagining the scene. I'm sorry about that. Mom said you shouldn't have sent anything, that it would just confuse things. But Grandma said maybe it was time to stop pretending nothing happened. Charlotte's voice dropped even lower. What did she mean, Aunt Kat? What happened? Why don't you come over anymore? The innocent question landed like a physical blow. Of course the twins wouldn't understand my sudden absence from family gatherings. They were 13, old enough to sense attention but young enough to be shielded from the ugly truth. What had they been told about why their aunt was no longer welcome? It's complicated, honey, I said carefully. Your mom and I had a disagreement, and we haven't figured out how to fix it yet. Is it because of what Dad did? Charlotte asked, her voice small but certain. I froze. What do you mean? Last Christmas, when he followed you downstairs. A rustling sound as if she was shifting the phone. I saw him. I was looking for my new earbuds, and I saw him go into the laundry room after you. He looked weird, and when he came out, you looked upset. My breath caught. Charlotte had seen. She had witnessed the beginning of the encounter that had torn our family apart. The validation was both vindicating and horrifying. If she had seen David follow me, what else had she observed or intuited over the years? Charlotte, honey, I began, unsure how to navigate this minefield. That's part of it, yes. But adult relationships can be very complicated. He's gross sometimes, she interrupted with startling vehemence. The way he looks at my friends when they come over. Mom doesn't see it. But Lily and I do. We don't invite people over much anymore. The implications of her words sent a chill through me. If David was making inappropriate comments to me, his sister-in-law, what boundaries might he be crossing with his daughter's teenage friends? The thought was nauseating. Charlotte, has your dad ever? Has he ever made you or Lily uncomfortable? Or one of your friends? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady despite the surge of protective fury rising within me. Not exactly. He just stares too much. Makes comments about how we're turning into young ladies and stuff. It's creepy. She paused. I miss you, Aunt Kat. I read the book you sent already. Most of it, anyway. The abrupt subject change was pure. Charlotte's emotional moments had always made her retreat to safer conversational territory. That was fast. Do you like it so far? Yeah? It's weird, but good weird like you. A smile in her voice now, the first I'd heard. Then, more urgently, I have to go. I think I hear Mom coming upstairs. Merry Christmas, Aunt Kat. Merry Christmas, Charlotte. I love. But she had already hung up, leaving me with the phone pressed to my ear in a maelstrom of emotions. Relief at hearing her voice. Joy that the red box had been delivered and opened. Vindication that someone else had witnessed David's behavior, and deep, gnawing concern about what Charlotte had revealed regarding her father's interactions with her friends. I sat motionless for several minutes, processing the conversation. Should I call someone? Report my concerns about David? But to whom and based on what evidence? The vague discomfort of a 13-year-old was hardly grounds for formal intervention, especially coming through me, the already discredited family pariah. Yet I couldn't simply ignore what I'd heard. If nothing else, I needed to find a way to maintain contact with Charlotte and Lily, to ensure they had a trusted adult to turn to if things ever escalated beyond creepy comments. But how to do that without further antagonizing Emma and my mother? The red box. It had already opened one channel of communication, however tenuous. Perhaps it could serve as a bridge, a neutral territory where family connections could be maintained even as the adults worked through their conflict. With renewed purpose, I stood and retrieved my laptop. There was still an hour before I needed to leave for Nora's dinner. Enough time to begin a letter not to my mother or sister this time, but to my nieces. A proper letter, handwritten on the stationery I reserved for special occasions, explaining that the red box was now theirs to borrow whenever they wished to communicate with me. They could fill it with notes, small treasures, questions they couldn't ask aloud. I would respond in kind, maintaining our connection through this shared family artifact. It was a risky strategy. Emma might intercept the letters, refuse to allow the box to travel between households. But based on Charlotte's call, my mother seemed to be softening her position somewhat. Perhaps she would serve as intermediary, facilitating this limited contact while the deeper wounds between her daughters remained unhealed. As I began to write, choosing my words with care, I felt a subtle shift in my emotional landscape. The crushing loneliness of the morning hadn't disappeared, but it had been tempered by purpose. By the reminder that family connections persisted even through conflict and separation. Charlotte's call had been a Christmas gift more precious than anything that could have been wrapped and placed beneath a tree. By the time I carefully packed the chocolate mousse cake and prepared to leave for Nora's, my steps felt lighter. This Christmas hadn't been what I'd hoped for, but neither had it been the complete isolation I'd feared. The red box had begun its work, creating a small opening in the walls that had separated me from my family for 9 painful months. It was a beginning, a small one, fragile as a snowflake but real nonetheless. Nora's house vibrated with cheerful chaos. When I arrived, her 3 children racing through the living room with new toys, her husband attempting to assemble something with far too many small parts, Christmas music competing with the television, where a basketball game played with the volume low. The normality of it was both comforting and disorienting after my quiet morning. "You made it!" Nora exclaimed, engulfing me in a hug that smelled of pine and cinnamon. "And you brought that cake you've been torturing me with descriptions of for weeks. Come in, come in." The next few hours passed in a blur of food, conversation, and the kind of easy laughter that comes from being among people who expect nothing from you except your presence. Nora's extended family welcomed me without question or awkwardness, incorporating me into their traditions as if I'd always been part of them. We played charades after dinner, ate too much dessert, and exchanged small gifts, including a beautiful journal Nora's mother had selected for me. Because Nora says you're always writing things down. It wasn't my family Christmas, but it was warm and genuine, and for stretches of time, I was able to be fully present rather than aching for what I was missing elsewhere. The party was winding down, guests beginning to depart, when my phone buzzed with a text message. I excused myself to check it, expecting perhaps another holiday greeting from a friend or colleague. Instead, I found myself staring at my mother's name on the screen, the first direct communication from her in nearly 2 months. The message was brief, just 4 words: "The girls miss you." Not "I miss you." Not "I'm sorry." Not "please come over." But an acknowledgement, at least, that my absence was felt, that I hadn't been entirely erased from the family narrative. I considered how to respond. A part of me wanted to ignore the message, to reciprocate the months of silence she had imposed. Another part wanted to pour out all the hurt and anger I'd been carrying since her phone call declaring me unwelcome. Neither approach seemed likely to move us forward. Finally, I typed, "I miss them too. Thank you for giving them the gifts. Merry Christmas, Mom." Simple. Direct. Neither confrontational nor overly conciliatory. An acknowledgement of her small olive branch without surrendering my dignity or truth. Her response came more quickly than I expected: "The red box should stay in the family." Even when the family is complicated, I stared at the screen, trying to decipher the layers of meaning in her message. Was she merely stating that the heirloom shouldn't leave family possession? Or was she affirming, in her own indirect way, that I remained family despite the current estrangement? The ambiguity was typically my mother leaving interpretation to the receiver, maintaining plausible deniability should her tentative overture be rejected. "I agree," I replied. "After careful consideration, maybe the box itself can help uncomplicate things with time." 3 dots appeared indicating she was typing a response. They remained for what felt like an eternity, disappearing and reappearing several times before her message finally arrived. "Maybe. Charlotte asked if you could come for New Year's brunch. Just to think about." I caught my breath. An actual invitation, however hesitant and qualified. A potential end to my exile, or at least the beginning of its conclusion. Immediately, questions flooded my mind. Would Emma be there? David? Would I be expected to recant my account of what happened? To offer false apologies for telling the truth? But those were considerations for another day. Tonight, it was enough to know that the door had cracked open, allowing a slim shaft of light into what had seemed impenetrable darkness. "I'll think about it," I promised, matching her non-committal tone. "Thank you for letting me know." She didn't respond further, but she didn't need to. The exchange had accomplished what perhaps neither of us had consciously intended: the establishment of a fragile line of communication, acknowledgement that the bonds of family, however strained, remained intact. Later that night, as I prepared for bed in my quiet apartment, I found myself thinking about the red box sitting in my mother's house. For generations, it had held the tangible artifacts of women's lives, small treasures that mapped joy, sorrow, love, and loss. Now it had taken on a new role, becoming not just a repository for memories, but a vehicle for reconciliation, or at least for preventing complete dissolution of family bonds. I hadn't anticipated this outcome when I left it on my mother's porch the previous evening. I'd hoped, at most, for a tacit acknowledgement of my existence, a small breach in the wall of silence that had surrounded me since spring. Instead, the box had apparently sparked conversation, some difficult, based on Charlotte's account of arguments overheard, but conversations nonetheless. After months of enforced absence and silence, words were being spoken, positions reconsidered, possibilities entertained. As I drifted toward sleep, I realized that this Christmas, different as it had been from any I'd experienced before, had not been the desolate day I'd feared. Between Charlotte's call, my mother's text, the warmth of Nora's family gathering, and the small but meaningful gifts from friends and colleagues, I had been reminded that connection takes many forms. Some family ties had frayed almost to breaking, yes, but others had strengthened in unexpected ways. I had not been forgotten or erased. The red box had done its work, carrying pieces of myself across boundaries I could not personally cross. What happened next remained uncertain. New Year's brunch was still a tentative possibility, not a guaranteed reconciliation. The issues that had divided us remained unresolved. The truth of what happened with David still contested territory. But for tonight, it was enough to know that my small act of defiance and hope, leaving that red box on a snowy porch, against explicit instructions, had created movement where there had been only stagnation. For tonight, that was victory enough. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. Tomorrow I would begin considering the complex calculations involved in potentially re-entering family spaces where my truth had been denied, where my character had been questioned. I would need to determine my own boundaries, the terms under which I could interact with David, with Emma, with my mother. I would need to balance my need for vindication against the possibility of maintaining relationships with my nieces, who deserved an aunt who wouldn't disappear from their lives during their formative teenage years. But those were tomorrow's problems. Tonight, I allowed myself the simple comfort of knowing I had not been entirely cast out, that the red box and the history and connections it represented had created a small opening, where reconciliation might, someday, take root and grow. 5 days after Christmas, I stood on my mother's porch again, this time in broad daylight with a proper invitation. The red box had indeed opened a channel, though tensions remained high. New Year's brunch would be a careful dance of unspoken boundaries. Mom answered the door herself, her expression a complex mixture of emotions. "Catherine," she said simply, stepping aside to let me in. The familiar scent of her home cinnamon and lemon furniture polish brought an unexpected tightness to my throat. Charlotte and Lily rushed forward immediately, enveloping me in enthusiastic hugs that momentarily dissolved the awkwardness. "We've been using the red box," Charlotte whispered, "just like your letter said." My mother overheard. "Yes, it's become quite the communication system. The girls bring it back and forth when they visit." I noticed what she didn't say, that Emma and David weren't present. A small mercy, allowing this first tentative reunion to occur without the most volatile elements. Brunch was surprisingly pleasant, the conversation carefully navigating around sensitive topics. The twins dominated the discussion with stories from school and questions about my teaching. Mom seemed content to observe, occasionally adding a comment or passing a dish. As the girls cleared the table, Mom finally addressed the elephant in the room. "Emma doesn't know you're here," she admitted. "That's a conversation for another day. But I've been thinking about what Charlotte said she saw last Christmas." My breath caught, and I'm not ready to say you were right or Emma is wrong. But I am ready to say that perhaps there's more to this situation than I initially allowed myself to consider. She reached across the table, briefly touching my hand. The red box reminded me that our family history is complex, with many perspectives. No single narrative captures everything. It wasn't an apology or full vindication, but it was acknowledgement that my experience deserved consideration, the first step toward real reconciliation. As I prepared to leave, the twins presented me with the red box, our contribution, Lily explained. Inside lay 2 identical friendship bracelets they've made, one for each of my wrists. So you remember you're still part of us. Even when we're apart, Charlotte said. I tied them on immediately. These small tokens more precious than any expensive gift. The road ahead remained uncertain. Emma would eventually need to be told about these visits. Boundaries with David established, deeper conversations had about trust and belief. But for today, the simple act of being welcomed back, however conditionally, felt like enough. The red box sat in the passenger seat as I drove home, once again carrying memories between fractured family spaces, but this time, also carrying hope. Spring arrived with tentative family healing mirroring the season's renewal. The red box had continued its work, traveling between households with increasing frequency, carrying notes, small gifts, and gradually, harder truths. In February, my mother had finally confronted David about Charlotte's observations, leading to his reluctant admission that he had maybe been inappropriate with me, while he minimized his actions. The admission itself cracked Emma's certainty about his innocence. By March, the carefully separated family gatherings had given way to cautious joint dinners, first without David, then eventually including him under strictly managed circumstances. The conversations were difficult, often painful, but necessary. Today, Mother's Day, marked the first holiday we would all spend together since last Christmas. As I parked outside Emma's house, anxiety fluttered in my stomach. Despite months of careful reconciliation, family gatherings remained complex emotional territory. Emma met me at the door, her expression still carrying shadows of unresolved hurt, but with genuine welcome too. Everyone's in the backyard, she said, hesitating before adding, I'm glad you're here, Kat. In the garden, my mother sat with the twins, the red box open between them as they showed her something inside. She looked up as I approached, her smile reaching her eyes in a way it hadn't for over a year. Catherine, she said, patting the chair beside her. The girls were just showing me their latest addition to the box. Apparently it's now a multi-generational communication device. Charlotte grinned. We found an old picture of you and Mom when you were our age. Grandma had it in her photo albums. We thought it should be in here too. The photographs showed Emma and me at about 12 and 8, arms around each other's shoulders, gap-toothed grins facing the camera, a reminder of the bond that had existed before adult complications. A bond that had bent but not completely broken. It's perfect, I said, taking the photograph and studying our younger, untroubled selves. Sometimes we need reminders of where we started. Emma came up behind me, looking over my shoulder. Mom took that the summer we went to Cape Cod, she said softly. Remember how you were afraid of the waves, and I taught you to body surf? The memory surfaced, warm and sweet. You told me to close my eyes and trust you, that you wouldn't let go. A weighted silence fell between us, the parallel to our current situation unmistakable. Trust, once broken, was being carefully rebuilt, fragment by fragment. David remained at a respectful distance across the garden, manning the grill with steady focus. Our interactions were minimal by mutual, unspoken agreement. He would always be family through his connection to Emma and the girls, but our relationship had permanently shifted to one of polite distance rather than familiar closeness. It was a compromise we all lived with. Mom reached for the red box, running her fingers over its worn edges. This old thing has seen our family through so many changes, she mused. Weddings, births, disagreements, reconciliations. When I gave it to you, Catherine, I never imagined how important it would become. Sometimes the best traditions are the ones we don't plan, I replied, watching Charlotte carefully place the photograph inside the box, nestling it among decades of family artifacts. Lily looked up. Is it still yours, Aunt Kat? Or is it ours now? It belongs to all of us, I answered. That's what I've learned. Some things can't be owned by just one person. The same could be said for family truth. No single perspective captured the whole. Emma's fierce loyalty to her husband, my painful experience that December night, Charlotte's observations, my mother's complicated position all were parts of our shared reality, however contradictory they might seem. As we gathered around the table for lunch, the conversation flowed with surprising ease. The boundaries established over months of careful negotiation held firm. No one demanded perfect forgiveness or complete resolution. We simply existed together in this new, more authentic family configuration, where difficult truths could be acknowledged without destroying connection. That evening, as I prepared to leave, Mom pulled me aside. I was wrong to shut you out last Christmas, she said, the closest she'd come to a direct apology. Whatever happened, and I believe now that something did happen, you deserve to be heard. Thank you, I said simply, the words healing something deep within me. That means more than you know. She pressed the red box into my hands. Take this home tonight. Add something that represents this day. This new beginning. Later, alone in my apartment, I opened the box and considered what might symbolize this complicated reconciliation. Not something perfect or unmarked, but something that acknowledged both fracture and repair. I finally selected a small piece of sea glass I collected years ago, once sharp and broken, now smoothed by time, and tied it to something both beautiful and honest about its history. Placing it carefully among the family treasures, I thought about the journey of the past year. The painful exile. The snowy Christmas Eve when I defied rejection by leaving the red box on my mother's doorstep. The slow, uneven path back to family connection. Some wounds might never completely heal. Some truths would always be contested. But the red box had taught us all that family history is capacious enough to hold multiple realities, that connection can persist through conflict when we make space for complexity. As I closed the lid, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me since last December. We were family still, different but intact, navigating our way toward a new understanding of what that meant, and sometimes, that imperfect reconciliation is the most honest victory of all.